All right, breaking news. This is your quick World War III update. Turmoil is erupting in Russia today. Vladimir Putin has given an emergency address in response to the firebombing of voting booths and the dumping of ink inside ballot boxes. Numerous instances of this across the country. You even have some voting stations being evacuated because they're in the crosshairs of a cross-border incursion that is currently ongoing that is being called the largest invasion of the Russian mainland since World War II. We're talking about 2,500 troops. So this is much bigger than the gallivants that we've seen over the Russian border last year by these partisan separatist groups, these rebel groups who claim to be of Russian origin and are espousing, of course, numerous varied renditions of neo-Nazi ideologies as defined by the Anti-Defamation League here in the West, who is surprisingly silent about this whole affair as it's unfolding. In addition to the 2,500 troops that were beaten on Russia's border in the last few days, they also had some heavy equipment. So they had armor, they had tanks, I believe up to 50 different types of military vehicles. So this was no joke. And in concert with this, there was a coordinated drone attack, which is ongoing as we speak, which you're likely going to see ramp up in the hours ahead. Now, interestingly, the Weimar Triangle, the leaders of France, Germany, and Poland had an unannounced meeting or an unexpected meeting. Typically, this group meets. This is a group which was established, I believe, in 1991. And they meet regularly, but this was an emergency meeting to discuss, of course, how they're going to escalate the conflict against the Russians, who Macron just yesterday referred to as an existential threat to Europe. So there's no way they're going to let this go. What you're going to have is you're going to have the Germans, who are going to provide the industrial powerhouse. You're going to have the French, who are going to be the nuclear umbrella, if you can even really call it that. I mean, it's 2 or 3 Sarmat missiles, and that situation is taken care of real quick from the Russians' point of view anyways. And then, of course, Poland is going to be the conventional military force and the manpower, the human resources for the meat grinder that are going to be supporting Ukraine from the rear. So this is how it's going to go down. And there's a video that's been circulating, as you can see behind me here, which I think incorrectly characterizes how World War III will play out. Now, I'm not sure why this is suddenly circulating right now, because it's an old video. There's plenty of video games that show, that depict World War III unfolding, but this is only half the story. This is the retaliatory strike, as we call it, because we would never strike the Russians with nuclear weapons first. We would never be trying to hatch some sort of decapitation strike plan. No, we would never do that. It's not like we've dropped nuclear weapons before. It's not like we've partook in indiscriminate shock and awe campaigns. It's not that we've openly supported civilian deaths to the tune of nearly 30,000 and climbing in the Gaza Strip. So we would never do that. Of course, Russia would always be the one who would use nuclear weapons against us first. And in that case, what would happen here is that we would respond. However, the depiction here, I don't think they quite understand. They're saying estimated fatalities from a counterstrike would be 45 million. Russia's population is around 150 million if you include the new annexed territories. So that would be about a third of their population, and I presume that it's very likely in the years and decades to follow, 90% of those people who still survived would likely be dying out as well, because it's not even so much the nuclear fallout. I mean, it is that. It's the potential for nuclear winter, because nuclear winter is still kind of hypothetical and theoretical, but it's also the nuclear power plants that would be destroyed. But the primary issue I have with this animation is it presumes that we're just going to put a nuke wherever there is people, and that is not the case. Most of the nuclear weapons are going to be trying to take out military targets or trying to entomb the Russian leadership in their bunkers. That's where the majority of nukes are going to try to take out whatever Russian nukes might remain, whatever nuclear assets and critical infrastructure might remain, but it would surprise a lot of people, I think, that you actually want to withhold a lot of your nuclear arsenal so you can get the other side to surrender. So you would hold the cities for ransom. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to immediately start nuking Moscow in the case of a retaliatory strike. Now, it is, I will say that judging by the way that our leaders do things and how reactionary we tend to be, they very likely will go for some of the larger urban centers. But, all of this, like this complete and utter total war of nuclear annihilation, this is not how it's going to play out. The Russians aren't going to do this to us. Yes, Washington's a goner, probably going to take out New York City. They're probably going to take out some of the big major centers, but not necessarily. They're going to go for the missile silos. They're going to go for the military bases. They're going to go to the centers of power, the political institutions, the critical infrastructure that we need in order to rebuild society. That's what they're going to go for. And they're going to say, if you do not surrender, we're going to start nuking your cities one by one. Vladimir Putin was noticeably perturbed today in his emergency address that he gave. And I'm calling this an emergency address. I presume that on voting day, he is going to address the population in some way, shape, or form. I think that is probably customary. But the manner in which he presented was very annoyed. And you only see this when Russia is about to take action and do something. So I think that once this election wraps up, the gloves are coming off. You are going to see a whole other side of Vladimir Putin in this civil war with Ukraine. And we have to keep that in mind, that this is, in fact, a civil war. It was brought to my attention today again, and I knew this fact, but it's something that I kind of just dismissed because, you get to absorb so much data and you forget about how odd of a situation this actually is. And so you have right now the commander of the Ukrainian armed forces who has family members. His parents, in fact, reside in Russia. So we must remember that this is a fratricidal war. This is a war between brothers, okay? And most of the most intense conflicts in human history have been wars between phenotypes: North Korea, South Korea, Vietnam, the Civil War, and of course now this conflict. Those, for some reason, are the most intense of conflicts. So right now, the commander of the Ukrainian armed forces has relatives in Russia. Okay, so that's how weird this situation is. But that also tells you how concerned NATO must be that if you have that kind of a phenol overlap, there's nothing to say that at some point in time, the Ukrainians can't join the Russians, can't be assimilated into Russia. And then, of course, all of that human resources and manpower and disdain that has been developing for these Ukrainian commissars who are scooping people off the streets to go to the front line, that is going to be turned against Poland. And Dmitry Medvedev recently stated that the war, or wasn't Medvedev, it was one of the run-of-the-mill Russian mainstream propagandists, I think it was Solovyov, who said that we're not going to be as easy on the Poles. Right now, we're showing restraint in the conflict. And for some people, that might sound insane if you just were born yesterday. But when you compare it to the numbers that we're seeing in the Gaza Strip, the Russians are indeed showing a hell of a lot of strength. I mean, you got to consider that these guys have, thousands of nuclear weapons, and they've yet to use one, in spite of the fact that they continuously have been having their oil refineries bombed, like this one that was bombed last night by a drone strike. Okay, so their oil output has been reduced significantly over the past couple weeks, and these drone strikes are only going to ramp up day after day. I don't know how any economy could endure such attacks and still remain financially solvent and functioning. But they're doing it. Somehow they're doing it. These are all the attacks that we've seen on Russian territory to date. I'm not sure if you can, how well that's coming across on the screen there. Let me just see if I can't turn my ISO down a little bit. Most people don't realize how difficult it is to film in front of a screen and to have the screen be the right brightness. Right now you don't notice it, but this screen is very hard for me to see. Anyways, you didn't need to know that. Maybe we'll do a video technical series at some point. Anyways, you can see that they're targeting oil refineries all throughout the country, okay? And this map, I don't even think does it justice. There's a lot more oil and gas facilities. I mean, hundreds of oil and gas facilities. This is just the ones that they've done recently. So this is, of course, going to have some negative economic repercussions for Russia in the near future. That is 100% for sure. We have some very provocative statements today. The president of Latvia essentially saying that they want to destroy, that Russia needs to be destroyed, calling for the destruction of Russia. And Latvia, I believe, has a military of around 17,000 guys. Right now, what concerns me is that Canada is currently in Latvia for military exercises as a part of Steadfast Defender. We are sending all kinds of weapons and equipment, 1,500 tons, I believe. I'm not sure what that really translates into in terms of actual vehicles, but something is about to go down, okay? I'm not convinced at all that Steadfast Defender, it is not an exercise, okay? I think that should be obvious to people now that Steadfast Defender is not an exercise. You don't put 100,000 troops into, along the entire front for an exercise. I'm sorry, I'm not buying that at all. And I'm sure a lot of you guys aren't buying that either. Like I said, Olaf Scholz today basically met with all of the leaders of the Weimar group, as it's called. And we'll get this on the screen just so we don't have to look at that guy. So there was an emergency meeting, and basically they're going to be expanding cooperation on the production of military equipment. They're going to be providing longer range rocket artillery, and they also talked about building military bases in Ukraine, which, as we've talked about yesterday, is completely absurd and preposterous. The reason why I'm showing Starship here is because I'm of the belief now that this whole Starship thing that Elon is partaking in, there's got to be something else to this. I'm suspecting that, if the reason why the Russians are accelerating their space-based nuclear weapons program probably has something to do with the fact that this whole Starship thing is going to be utilized towards that end in some way, shape, or form. I'm not sure if the Russians have an equivalent. I'm presuming that they don't have an equivalent spaceship delivery platform that is reusable, especially not as large. So I'm thinking that something is going on in terms of preparations for space. Are they getting ready to leave the planet, build a bunker? Maybe it's not that extreme, even though Elon Musk seems to be quite open about his intentions to have a dual planetary species, so that we have a backup plan, or the elites do. I think they're going to try to build some kind of Elysium thing. And indeed, there's probably going to be some industrial component to this, but I think the primary motivation for this Starship campaign is going to be military in nature. Absolutely, 100%. This is going to be about utilizing this for its military potential. The Lithuanian defense minister resigned today, and they're not saying why. Lithuanian defense minister Arvydas Anušauskas is resigning. Now, these are just these little data points that signal that, you got all these ambassadors being fired, you got ambassadors being expelled, diplomats being expelled, and when you see, these high-level ministers and high-level political actors being dismissed from their positions or resigning, there's a good chance that there's going to be a change in policy implemented. Either that means, there's a war coming. We know that Belarus is getting ready for war. That's been very clear, not only in the body language exhibited by the leader, Lukashenko, but of course by their military posturing as of late. And so, of course, so all of the countries that surround Belarus are going to be likely making some moves. And if somebody was not on board, then I guess it's time to resign. So there's a good possibility that they're getting ready to actually go to war with Belarus. So you have Europe planning on confiscating Russian assets. So they're going to use windfall profits from the Russian assets, which are frozen in Europe, to financially support the purchase of weapons for Ukraine. And I can tell you right now that that is going to crash the euro. That when they start that scheme, it's not going to be good for the European economy in the long run, because of course anybody who's holding euros is not going to feel confident. It's the same reason why a lot of countries are calling back their gold from Western central banks. They don't trust the United States and they don't trust the holders to preserve that and to give it to them when the time comes that they want to make a withdrawal. So in addition to the planning on confiscating Russian assets, they're also going to be banning agricultural products. So think about that. Europe used to benefit from Ukraine, which was the grain basket, the bread basket of Europe. And of course, a lot of that soil is going to be completely contaminated for years to come, but a lot of it is in the crosshairs of this war that is currently ongoing. Now they're going to ban Russian agricultural products and Belarusian agricultural products. So that's going to take fertilizers. I think Belarus produces a large amount, and Russia combined and Ukraine, those three countries produce a huge chunk of the world's fertilizers and grains. So you're going to take that off the market. So you're going to see even more food inflation in Europe. So this is food inflation. And this is kind of deceptive because you see disinflation, but you still have inflation happening to the tune of around 7% per year for food. Okay, that's a lot considering it was just at nearly 20%. So this is all compounding. It's not until this goes below this line, which it likely never will. I mean, I guess it kind of dipped below it a little bit in October of 2016, but by and large, this number always goes up, especially now that the developing world is growing in population and they're starting to increase their standard of living. So that's going to put more stress on the global food supply, not counting climactic issues, which are mounting by the day. I believe it's climactic forces that are forcing the price of cocoa to now go up to $8,000 per ton. It was about $3,000 last year. So you're going to get these wild swings of inflationary data in the not so distant future. So this is going to cause a food crisis, and it's self-inflicted. It's Europe shooting itself in the foot. Now, in terms of what's going on in the Black Sea, this is the Black Sea, and I haven't shown a map for a while. I still have my war map. People are like, bring back the map. We like this interactive stuff. So, you know, I do too, but sometimes I find that it's not necessary. And sometimes for me to present these, make these presentations for you guys, it takes a lot of time to put in these interactive elements, and it takes away from my time to actually try to analyze the situation and try to give you a novel take on things. So this is the Black Sea right here, okay? And then we're just going to zoom in to a part of the Black Sea, which is close to Sochi. So this is Fort 10. This is a Northrop Grumman RQ-4B Global Hawk reconnaissance plane. Typically, these planes don't get this close. Now, the fact that it was this close is, you know, I mean, they're really getting close. Almost, typically, they wouldn't be, you know, coming nearly that close to Sochi. That's a major Russian urban center and actually close to some of Vladimir Putin's bunkers. So the fact that you have an American reconnaissance plane, one that the Russians already brought down one of them, it's almost like an invitation to shoot it down in order to provoke the Russians into doing something. Now, what I'm seeing right now, guys, is a complete media blackout of all of this in Western media. Nobody is talking about any of this. As I expressed yesterday, there isn't even a tab for the Ukraine war anymore, unless you go to a website like Newsweek or something. But by and large, the world is forgetting about this, and that is very concerning, considering now we are at the greatest risk of nuclear war that we've ever been in history, and that bears repeating every single day because the risk grows every single day. Now, I think part of the reason why they're turning a blind eye to what is happening there, because what's going to happen is people are going to, forget about the issue. The NPCs of the world are going to go about their day, and they're not all NPCs. They're just people who are trying to get by and having to work 2 and 3 jobs now to keep pace with inflation. But what's going to happen is this media silence is going to make the Russian response to all of this provocation more starkly contrasted against what most people are going to presume was a calming of relations and a seeming detente between the two sides, because of course people have forgotten. People probably think, there's not much going on over there. No, there's a full-scale, high-intensity, hot war going on with thousands of people dying every single day, okay? And it's getting worse because NATO is now getting very involved in the conflict. And what's going to happen is that suddenly there's going to be a major response from the Russians, and that's going to be breaking news and contrasted against what most people are perceiving to be a situation which has been alleviated. Then it's going to seem even more shocking. It's going to be a very black swan-like event. I don't know what the scale and scope of it's going to be, but when you have 2,500 troops, okay, they're saying that they're the Russian Liberation Army, neo-Nazis. Some of them are other groups which might not be as ideologically aligned with that odious ideology, but there are certainly Ukrainian elements that are backing these groups because, of course, this is happening at the same time as drone strikes are occurring inside the country, some of which might even be launched from the Baltic Sea. So we know that NATO is backing Ukraine, and Ukraine is enabling these groups on some level, obviously. I mean, we would be naive to presume they weren't. So effectively, you have NATO attacking Russia. NATO is invading Russia. Now, don't take that out of context. I just explained the context. NATO is supplying the resources, they're supplying the missile defense, likely supplying the troops and mercenaries on the ground who are in non-combative roles, but in some way helping the Ukrainians to maintain various things. And of course, they're providing the weapon systems, they're providing the reconnaissance, the intelligence. Those Ukrainians are thereby enabling these groups that are fighting on the border regions. I mean, where are they staging from? Okay, obviously they're staging from parts of Ukraine, and so they're being enabled. So effectively, you have a situation where NATO is engaging in the largest ever invasion into Russia since World War II. It's not getting any media attention. And who is the spearhead? It's a guy who is an outspoken, what is his name? I can't remember his name, but the leader of the Russian Liberation Army or whatever it is somebody who espouses the neo-Nazi ideology, exactly what Vladimir Putin has been talking about. So this war, I'm sorry to say, it's just going to keep getting worse and worse and worse. There is no signs of it abating at all. World central banks are withdrawing gold and foreign exchange reserves from Western countries after freezing of Russian assets. So people don't trust the West anymore. It's all coming down. It's all going to crash. This is not, I am not a fiduciary, so I'm not going to be giving you any sort of financial advice. But all I will say is that if it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it's probably a duck. If we are at it, I mean, just take a look at what's happening around the world. Is there anything right now that justifies the stock market being as high as it is? You really have to think hard. You could say, well, employment rate's low. But when you look at, consumer debt loads, when you look at inflation and just the cumulative inflation over the past few years, when you look at all the geopolitical turmoil that is currently happening around the world and the potential for multipolarity. I haven't even gotten to talk about TikTok yet. I think I'm gonna have to make a dedicated video about the TikTok situation because that is the start of World War III. Okay, TikTok, and I mean, Well, we're already in World War III on one front, but this is such a crucial issue. A lot of people think, they're just trying to ban TikTok, but no. This is the beginning of something. Okay, this, and the Canadians now are conducting a national security review because they're going to follow in the footsteps of the Americans who are trying to ban TikTok and forced ByteDance, the main shareholder of the company, to divest and sell off their stocks. And this makes perfect sense. People don't want to hear this, but it makes perfect sense because we don't have any equivalent TikTok in China. It's as simple as that. China regulates and controls all forms of social media that are currently present in the country. So whether it's Facebook or Google or Instagram, WhatsApp, Twitch, Pinterest, Wikipedia, Reddit, and all other Western services, if they haven't been banned by the Chinese government, they've been heavily regulated. It's called the Great Chinese Firewall, okay? So we don't have any of those restrictions here. That's problematic on the one hand for data, but what they're more concerned about is, and a lot of people are saying it's to do with Israel and because the Israeli lobby is trying to back to have this TikTok ban. But recall, they were trying to push for this TikTok ban long before October 7th ever happened. And people need to remember that. And I, in fact, have been an advocate of it for a long time. And this is surprising because I'm a staunch free rights advocate. However, when you're talking about adversarial countries, and I'm not saying that, anything bad against China. I do a lot of business with the Chinese, okay? But from adversarial point of view, even if we're the ones who provoked it, which we have, we're the ones who are currently, right now, right outside of China, in Taiwan. There's special forces groups operating on this island right here, okay? Kinmen County Island. Right here, you have U.S. Special Forces, and that is China right there, okay? So we are the ones who are provoking this. Don't get me wrong. But the fact is that the Chinese have this inroad to our society and this ability to manipulate, and not even so much manipulate public opinion. Because let's face it, anybody on TikTok, they're not going out and protesting. They're not taking action. These people are scrolling. They're addicted. They're just looking for rage content, okay? Content to get really triggered about. And so does this actually materialize into anything in the physical world? Probably not. I would say the platforms that are driving change are going to be things like X and YouTube, and the ones where you have an older population who actually has the resources to do certain things and the education to do certain things. The age on TikTok is, well, it's probably actually increasing now because the old people are figuring it out. The boomers are figuring out TikTok and they're getting addicted too. But by and large, this is not just, look, whether or not we had TikTok, that would not change the situation in Gaza. They still would have did the same shit that they did there. In fact, they'll continue to do it in the absence of TikTok. It's not, or if there was, if TikTok was provided free reign, nothing is going to change in that respect. Unfortunately, there is pushback, and indeed, they might be saying to themselves, well, more regulation is better than no regulation. So in that respect, it might benefit the Israeli lobby a little bit, but this was an issue long before that presented itself. Okay, there was states that were contemplating banning TikTok long before October 7th. It's a very complex issue indeed. There's a Trojan horse element to there. David Sachs gave a very insightful tweet about this, where he breaks down the more nuanced aspects of the TikTok bill and how it's going to be used as a mechanism for censorship. But by and large, something has to be done. It is what it is. And this is the cold, hard reality of people realizing what a multipolar world truly is. It's an iron curtain, okay? And so what that means is all of that stuff that you get from Walmart right now, that you get from Costco, those days are numbered, okay? The cheap labor that we get from the Chinese, when this full decoupling happens, it's going to be a completely different set of arrangements. And this is probably why they're trying to get as many immigrants into the country, or they're working on these deals with Mexico to start bringing the manufacturing hub back to North America. Because when this starts, when this TikTok ban is put in place, it's going to start a chain reaction of decoupling. And this is exactly what you would see before a war between two countries. This level of decoupling. This is the first thing that has to happen. This is where it starts. So this TikTok thing is big. It is very big, and I should probably do a deeper dive. I've already done a dedicated video with respect to the issue a few months ago, but it's something that becomes more important by the day. The head of the German Foreign Ministry is hatching a scheme, working on a plan on how Berlin could supply long-range missiles to Ukraine without crossing Chancellor Olaf Scholz's red lines. And how are they going to do it? What is this cunning plan, this scheme that they're going to put one over the Russians? Well, they're going to send the Taurus missiles to the UK, and the UK, in turn, is going to send them to Ukraine. That's the plan. Or, in exchange for that, the UK is going to send them more Scalp missiles. But it's kind of a ridiculous, I mean, at this point, we're still doing this thing where we're pretending we're not in direct war with the Russians. We are. We absolutely are. There's no doubt about it. And the G7 issued a warning to Iran. So they made a statement indicating that if Iran does transfer ballistic missiles, apparently they're getting ready to transfer 400 Fatah 110 missiles, very sophisticated technology, to Russia. And if they do that, they're going to deny Iranian planes access to European airspace. So that in itself is a major escalation. So every day that goes by, China, North Korea, Iran, and Russia become more entrenched. They become more solidified in geopolitically, financially, militarily. And this is just a sign that World War III is here, and it is here to stay, and you should prepare accordingly. Support the channel, CanadianPreparedness.com. That's the best way to support it. I don't engage in a lot of shameless self-promotion. I could just come on here at the beginning of every video and tell you who sponsored this video and that, but I would much rather that you just go and support the channel through Canadian Preparedness. That way, you support us, you support our local business, you support our employees who get paid a living wage, and you get to get yourself some gear at the same time, okay? Thanks for watching, guys. Take care. See you tomorrow.